The story of Jonah now picks up from a ship where Jonah has given up on God, but God has not given up on Jonah. So Jonah 1:4 starts by saying, "But the Lord." And just think about all the different directions this story could go at this point. Jonah was not the only prophet God could send to Nineveh. There were other prophets, which means God could have let Jonah sail off into the sunset, never to be seen again. But God didn't do that. Instead, the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea. And there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. God sent a storm that didn't just affect Jonah. Verse 5 says, the mariners were afraid. Each cried out to his God, and they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. These mariners from different nations who worshiped different gods knew that there was something supernatural about this storm. But Jonah had gone down. That's now the third time in this chapter we see Jonah headed downward into the inner part of this ship. The imagery here is Jonah going to the darkest place, physically and spiritually, he can get to, where he had laid down and was fast asleep. So the captain came and said to him, "What do you mean, you sleeper?" Translation, "What is wrong with you, man? Arise, call out to your God. Perhaps the God will give a thought to us that we may not perish." Do you see the irony here? The prophet from Israel is running from God, and the pagan ship captain from another nation is doing anything he can to seek God. And it's not just him. Back to the mariners in verse 7, they said to one another, "Come, let us cast lots, that we may know on whose account this evil has come upon us." They wanted to know who's responsible for this. So they cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. And immediately they peppered him with questions to find out who he was, what God he worshiped. They said to him, "Tell us on whose account this evil has come upon us. What is your occupation? Where did you come from? What is your country? And of what people are you?" And Jonah's response was enlightening to say the least. He said to them, "I am a Hebrew." Isn't this interesting? It's the first time Jonah speaks in the whole book. And the first words out of the mouth of this prophet of nationalistic pride are, "I am a Hebrew. This is my identity. And I fear the Lord." And as soon as you hear that, you think, really? Is that true? Or is Jonah just saying that? Then Jonah continued, "The Lord is the God of heaven who made the sea and the dry land." And immediately, verse 10 says, the men were exceedingly afraid. These mariners look like the ones who actually fear the Lord. And they said to him, "What is this that you have done?" For the men knew that he was fleeing from the presence of the Lord because he had told them. Then they said to him, "What shall we do to you that this sea may quiet down for us?" For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. Things were getting worse, and the sailors were wondering what to do. And Jonah said to them, "Pick me up and hurl me into the sea. Then the sea will quiet down for you. For I know it's because of me that this great tempest has come upon you." Like, what a response. Why this solution? Just think of all the other potential solutions. For one, Jonah could repent. He could fall on his knees and say, "I'm sorry, God, I should have obeyed you. Please spare these sailors and me." Or he could have said to these guys, "I'm running from God. The way to stop this storm is for us to turn around and go back." But Jonah did not want that. He would rather die than obey God. So verse 13 says, "Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to get back to dry land, but they could not, for the sea grew more and more tempestuous against them. Therefore they called out to the Lord, 'O Lord, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not on us innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you.'" These pagan sailors are now praying to the Lord, something the prophet Jonah hasn't done. And realizing they only had one option, and fear before God. Verse 15, they picked up Jonah and they hurled him into the sea. Just pause there and put yourself in Jonah's shoes as you look at the watery grave waiting for you. You thought you were running to a great, exotic, distant land, when in reality you were running to your death. This is where sin leads. And as soon as these sailors throw Jonah overboard, the sea ceased from its raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows. These pagan sailors fear and worship God. And chapter 1 comes to a close with two pictures. One, a shockingly disobedient Israelite, and two, surprisingly transformed Gentiles, people from outside Israel among the nations. So what do we take away from this part of Jonah's story? Well, a lot of things. We learn that sin always takes us on a downward path toward death. Sin always disorients us, deceives us, and leads us downward toward dark places. Jonah is showing us that rebellion against God never ends in our good. But notice how Jonah claims faith in God even as he's disobeying God. So that's another takeaway here. It's possible for us to have a kind of faith in God that lacks true fear of God. Jonah has faith that God exists, but he clearly doesn't fear or revere God. So what about you? Does your faith in God lead to fear and reverence for God, or not? And if not, then what might that say about your faith? Does the fear and awe and reverence and worship of your life look more like Jonah or more like these sailors? Which leads to the last couple of takeaways I would point out. The story of Jonah is clearly showing us that God will draw the nations to know and worship him. Isn't it interesting that even as Jonah disobeys God's command to go to a foreign nation, God uses Jonah to lead sailors from foreign nations to himself? We know from the end of the Bible that God will draw people from every nation to know and worship him. Revelation 7, 9 and 10 tells us, "After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands, crying out with a loud voice, 'Salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb.'" God will draw people from all the nations to himself. The question in our lives, much like Jonah's life, is, are we going to live for God's purpose or not? Which leads to one final takeaway from this first chapter. God is not just intent on the accomplishment of his purpose. God is also intent on the hearts of his people. If God was just focused on saving the nations, specifically Nineveh and the Assyrians, then God easily could have got another prophet to do the job. But God didn't. Why not? Because God was not just concerned about Nineveh. God was concerned about Jonah. And I want you to let that soak in. There are over 8 billion people in this world, over 3 billion of them unreached by the gospel. And God is intent on spreading his salvation to all of them. And God is also intent on your heart, right where you are sitting right now. So spend some time discussing these takeaways. How have you seen the disorienting and deceiving and deadly effects of sin in your life? And what does it look like for you to live, not just with faith in God, but with a healthy fear of God? And then ask, is your life aligned with God's purpose for the world to draw all nations to himself? And in all of this, like right now, how is God who is intent on your heart, speaking to you.